Hello, today we're going to talk about technical art, and Marcus is an expert in that field. So, Marcus, maybe we could start with your introduction. So, could you tell us more about you and your company?
Sure thing. Yeah. So thanks for having me. My name is Marcus. I'm a technical art, technical animator, whatever you want to call it. We can probably dive into that a little bit, where the difference is and where the overlap is, because there's a big one. I've been doing technical art or technical animation for about 16 years in the games industry. And recently, about 2 years ago, I think nearly 2 years ago, I started a technical art focused company which effectively, instead of having technical artists internally, is providing that as an outsourcing service. And company started about 2 years ago with just myself, and steadily grown. So we're about 5 people now full time, but sometimes we on and off ramp other people for other projects as well. So super excited to talk about technical art. I love technical art.
Yeah. So, the thing is, so why did you decided to create your own company? I mean, maybe I should say as well. We met each other in Sweden when we were both working on a game called The Division. Very different departments, but we still connected. I think we were both foreigners in a strange land, I guess, in Sweden. But I think it's quite interesting that the industry is a small place. So we've been very interested when you approach me at Gamescom, and just say, "Hi, Robyn." And like, I'm curious to know what you're doing, how things going. But so, what was the main motivation for you to create your own business, pretty much your own company in technical art?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a really long answer to that, but I think one big part of me was just like, hey, I've been doing this for a long time. There's probably other aspects to explore there. And I think at the time I never freelanced before. I was only ever working full time in companies. I'd say for the most part it was larger companies. There was some smaller ones as well, but it was like big wheel in a big old machine type of thing for a long time. And so this was one of the triggers, I'd say, to try something new. But then there's probably also a couple of other points, which I think to me the big one is really you kind of just keep repeating like the same things over and over again.
Hmm.
And I mean, on one hand, like as a technical artist in a games production, I'd say technical art is sort of like a strange discipline and no discipline at all, because I think after doing that for such a long time, no job was ever really the same.
Maybe to clarify, what kind of technical art do you do, and what is technical art in general? Because it's a
That's
very
a
wide field, right? So,
Yeah, that's also a very long conversation. What is technical art? I don't know. It's very different based on where you're working. There's a lot of different definitions. I'd say probably like the most common ones is to sort of split technical art into like almost like a static art and a character like animation side, where we have those terms technical art and technical animation. I think a lot of companies kind of divide it up like that, but then there's all these nuances, and even within those, it overlaps quite a bit. So I'd say like technical art in a nutshell is probably like problem solving. You're a
mhm.
problem solver, and even after doing this for such a long time, sometimes you're presented with a challenge where you have no idea about how to, what the problem even is, and how to solve it. So I'd say like yeah, big part is just understanding problem spaces, figuring out what they are, and finding a solution, and then uh, finding also a like scalable solution, because very often um, you're just doing like some sort of R&D, and then you figure out how to scale that, right? So then it goes into pipeline. So there's so many aspects of it, but I think a big one is problem solving.
So because you said, like, so technical art is about problem solving, and there's different type of problems, animations related, rendering related, pipelines related. So let's say you are a new entrepreneur in the video games industry, you want to create a game studio. When will technical art be relevant? And for example, what type of game basically you would give as an example of where technical art would really shine? So at what stage does it make sense to bring technical art, and what type of games basically could really technical artists can really help, and how?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, the answer is as early as possible, and because it's such an assisting role towards other roles, technical art. I'm gonna probably like talk more about technical animation because this is more in my domain.
Hmm.
But yeah, if you're working on a game that's very character heavy, I don't know. Let's say you're working on a football game, or soccer, as we call it in Europe. So you have all these players, probably hundreds of them. I don't know. They wear different shirts with different sponsors on. So you could hire a lot of artists to build all these players really bespoke
So
and
all right,
animate
so
them.
you want to make a football slash soccer game, right? So there's different players in this game. There are different heights. There are different gait in terms of how they're walking, running. It is very different. So very animation heavy project, I guess.
Yep.
Very individualized character. So that's a challenge you already know you're gonna get, right? So it's a team playing game like this. So you want to make each character and player feeling unique, and you think this is something where technical art can help, and you're saying as early as possible. Did
Yeah,
you?
no, 100%, as early as possible, because even when you're just trying to figure out what is the pipeline of actually scaling this, right? Because you can you build your prototype with your like 10 different players or whatever, they all look the same. And so now you actually want to scale it up and have all the original players in there, which is probably in hundreds. So the you so most likely you want to build some sort of Lego system for your artists so they can start assembling all of these characters. So um, you're right. So like they have all different like heights and sizes, but you might want to have them wear the same shirts. So now the question is, do you want to make the same shirt 50 times for every body type, or do you want to figure out some solution to just make that shirt once and
So,
build
so
a
I think
pipeline so it fits every player?
so that's quite interesting because for me, from an EP perspective, right? So an executive producer, I would say, all right, here then basically the game design team is telling me something different, right? They want to test the gameplay, the flow, the feel on the with the controller, basically, and they're saying like how the characters look and the animation looks. It's very down in their list, right? It's feeling more polished, like how it feels game will look like. But you're saying that actually the early on we're involving in technical art, the better it is. So could you help me understand why would I need to bring a technical artist, from the really beginning of the project instead of later on once we already have a playable game, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it depends how long you're even trying to build your prototype, right? But I've seen this so many times where you build a prototype and then you're like, okay, cool, let's make this for real, and you throw the whole prototype away and start over. I've seen this so many times. It'd be great if you could actually reuse all of these things and just continue building on top of that. And I think that this is what giving adding a technical artist early on is going to allow you to do. And at the same time, because it's such a cross discipline role, it's also like a very like educational role in a sense, right? Because very early on, you're you're kind of training because you're like this facilitator between different roles. So you're kind of bridging like gaps between engineers and artists, and very early on, having that there, I think, just allows for more information flow and cross
So,
collaboration because you're like this facilitator of
so
information flow.
let me ask you because I'm trying to get a bit of kind of different perspectives because usually the reason we're throwing away the prototype is because it's a lot of throwaway code, right? So they're basically the programmers just want to go fast. They're like hard coding things, they're just making it super raw, and it seems pretty easier to instead of to refactor a pile of bandage and, and really things patched around. They want to start from scratch. So knowing this, how much are you relying on this prototype code to work? Like, so is this more the time where it makes sense to bring you in when you're actually building the real thing, or being very early on is much better? Like, how much? Let's say, what would be interesting for the team to know? Would it save them time? Would it save them, I don't know, iteration thing? I don't know. Where do you think technical art? Why would it make sense for technical art to come very early on?
So specifically for animation, which again is is more in my domain. When you're building a prototype, let's say you have 4 characters in your game, and I've seen this many times where there was not a technical artist on the team early on, and then so
Mhm.
usually building the rigs, for instance, for the characters falls on the animator that animates them. And there's a lot of really really good animators out there that have technical skills, and that's great. That's a huge skill set to have. But then, I've seen this many times where rigs just get built for like one purpose only, right? And then it's it's already in your mind that you're gonna throw it away because someone's gonna have to come in and actually, build like a proper pipeline later for making rigs faster and all of those things. So if you have a technical artist early on, um, the rigs are already, and I mean, I don't mean to like generalize for animators, right? Like there's a lot of really, really good animators out there that have strong technical skills. Um, but often they don't have the time to go deep into the rigs, right? Because they got to start producing animations. That's what they're hired for. That's what they want to do, right?
Yeah, so if you have like a 2 year development time, let's say 24 months, instead of taking the first 6 months to make a prototype and to finalize things and then starting to look for technical art and to solve those animation problems, if you very early on build a better foundation, you'll have a better looking game and a better diversity of characters and animations because you gave your animation team the tools and the support they need to do a better job instead of just at the end rushing it, trying to make the game pretty and with cool animations. You will limit a lot the scope of what is possible to do
Mm-hmm.
because, well, let's say the height thing, right? You could say, well, it's just going to make too much time to make animations for different heights and we don't have the time to do it. So scratch that. So all the football players will have the same height. Or and that's the type of trade-off that will cost you at the end. Would that be a correct assessment?
100%, yeah. I mean, especially because the day you're adding a technical artist to your team, they're going to have to start building the base pipeline first, right? So that takes
Mhm.
time. And if you have while you're building your prototype, for instance, if you have a technical artist, they might be able to divide their time into helping build the prototype, but at the same time also start already building, the rails for riding the train later on. I think because that takes such a large amount of time, I think you know again the answer is hire technical artists today so they can start building those rails for later on. Because at least from my experience, I've had situations before where the first year or two you're just building tools and pipeline, and even though those things still evolve over time during your production. It's like this famous saying, like sailing, like sailing while you're still building the ship, is very
Yeah,
much true.
what you said is very interesting. You said that for the first and second year, you're still already building tools and pipelines and this. And then there's a lot of indie game studios out there saying, well, I don't have 1 or 2 years to just build tooling. I need stuff to be done right away. So how would you address that, right? Because let's say I have actually a friend is working on a esport type of game. It's a small team. They're getting funded and they need help to progress. How can technical help them because they don't have 2 years to get on the market?
Yeah, and so that's a really good point. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to start this company, right? Because I don't think there's too many technical art like outsourcers out there right now, but I think that's probably going to grow. I think in general the technical art field is going to grow um, for quite some time, and I think that also these sort of like outsourcing code of things are going to keep growing too, because it's precisely for this. There's some great solutions out there for character rigging, for instance, because I've been there before, where you start working on a game and you just build character rigs by hand. And I mean, for a full character with a face, weeks to months. And now we have all these great like open source rigging systems out there where you can do it in a matter of days. That's great. I think we need more of that, because yeah, I
Mhm.
remember the times where you had to build all of these things by hand, and I'm so glad that we don't have to do that anymore. But all of these larger companies, they had to get there. So I mean, most large companies, they have their own rigging systems, and even in some big companies, I'm not going to name anyone, but with sub teams, they have very different rigging tools, for instance, right? So it's almost like they build different car factories in their own home, and they might build cars in a slightly different way, but they all build cars. And yeah, I don't know where I'm trying to go with this.
No, but I think the point is, so let's say I have I have my small team. I want to get my game out of the door. I think my understanding from technical art is you can help make the game look much better because you'll have more animations, more fidelity. You can have a lot of more diversity of how things play and how things move in the world. So a lot more visual appeal, right? From an animation perspective, but also from a rendering perspective. We talked a bit less about technical art from a rendering perspective. It's one of the key aspects. I still remember when we talked about saying, hey, show me basically an illustration of how your game will look like. You can make sure that, you want the game to look like this. We can work with Unreal Engine or even Unity to make sure that your game looks like it does on this magnificent illustration that your 2D artist made, right? So these are things that we can help a studio with. Then you have basically this project to say, okay, we want to get out there fast. We don't have 1 or 2 years to build, and then the question is are there tools to go faster? Are you as a company able to just go out there and having already pipelines and save the time to build this up? Because I think there's like two different challenges here we're talking about. Is one, if you're a small to mid-sized company or indie studio, you don't have 2 years to build a pipeline for animations. If you do, it's a massive investment, and that will be you have to be covered and be useful for multiple games in the future. If you're an established company, you already have your tools, and this is another challenge, I guess, for you because you need to plug yourself in existing pipelines, almost like you cannot change them. So let's try to talk about the first one and then the second one. So in the first case, how can you help, let's say, me and my small game and teams to get this awesome stuff faster?
Yeah, so I mean, I can again bring sort of like up the just to understand like the different time constraints here. So if you're making a game, you're like, hey Marcus, I want to make this game with this really realistic human as a player character, and he needs to walk, run, shoot, take cover, or whatever. So just building the puppet for that, if you want to do that by hand, yeah, probably in the realm of weeks. You can add months if that's with a face. And we can build that stuff for you. Like, you call us on Monday, I can have the first thing on your desk by Friday, and then from there we can start iterating, right? So also, if you're just building like your character rig in house, and I mean there's various ways to do it. I'm just taking up like the building it from scratch, like by hand thing.
But already, let's say it would take a studio without support, let's say an experienced animator, right? About a week to a month, a few weeks to a month to create basic animations and facial animations. Even if you have a mocap studio, you would still need to do all the cleanups and all this. It would be a massive investment to do good animations, right? So, and what you're saying is a company specialized in technical art already has a lot of tools, pipelines, and setup that can already be plugged in with Unity and with Unreal to be efficient super fast. So how to value that, right, is more how much time you would save in your production. And so you will be saving time, meaning the quality will increase. So instead of taking a month, you take it only 1 week. So that divide the cost by basically 4 pretty much in terms of and resources. And of course, that can be reinvested in increasing the quality overall for your project.
Exactly. Yeah. That's I think that's precisely it. And yeah, I mean, it gives you time to develop the game instead of building a car factory, right? Because you want to make the game, not a car factory.
Exactly. Yeah, because I noticed personally when I talk to other fellow game creators on the design side, game studio owners, like they don't really understand the technical art field, right? Because it's a connector between all those basically fields and brings everything together and smooth basically the relationships and make things go faster. it's like production, right? So people have a hard time like, what does a producer do, right? They make shit happen fast and making sure it goes work. So it's basically if you were running a project without a project manager, with a producer, right? It doesn't. There's no this connecting tissue that makes sure things move smoothly and faster.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the challenges, people really don't understand so much what it can bring, and I think that hopefully this video will help people to understand the value this brings to their project. One of the things people I think we have to realize is this basically this discipline, technical art, is really present in bigger studios because they usually have more people involved and they are faced with the same problems over and over, and they need to get things fast and they're very ambitious. But now, as the market is evolving and there are more and more toolings like this, you still need expertise to, let's say, specialized expertise in even smaller or medium-sized projects. And now, basically, the best way for you to get this without having to hire every single talents and disciplines out there, working with outside partners is the only way to do it. You don't need if you only need this expertise for 20% of your time, you don't want to pay someone 100% of their time. So how can you create a system for your project that can really help you get the good stuff, making the game really good, looking good and professional, and doing this. And I would like also to point something that we didn't mention is for you out there that wants to pitch a game, right? So if you're making a small video, a small demo, like this, a technical art will really help will help your project and your videos to look much, much better because they can really connect this and those prototypes very fast and make them look really good and do a lot of magic and hacks to make it your things that to show this kind of helping your potential investor or publisher to see what will be the end, the production, the what is the end goal, right? Try to really like capture in this video you're making this small trailer, this small teaser, or even small images, right? To make sure that they look like you envision the game to be. And that will increase the value of your pitch and give more resources to build the game how it should look like. So there's many ways you can use technical art, right? So as a small and medium-sized studio or project. So saying that, now let's talk about bigger companies. Like they already have tools, like they even have their own engines. We worked at Ubisoft, they have their own engines. I think other companies have their own engines, and they also. So where those external technical artists can help when you're not involved in the really first stage of the project, which areas usually can really help them?
I mean, I think what it does for you, and this is like especially for like smaller or just medium-sized companies, right? You essentially get access to the same tools that a Ubisoft or an EA has that they have been building for many, many years. I think this is one of the I mean, you're not just getting the tools, right? You're getting the knowledge too. I think that in a lot of, and there's not too many, I checked technical art external developers. So usually people, I think, with the same drive that I had, which is just like, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this, right? We don't have to put 10 technical artists in a room for 2-3 years and have them build all of these things. And so, what you are essentially getting as a developer is you're getting access to the same tools that all of these big companies have without having to invest years to build those things, right? That's really what the main thing is that you're getting with it.
I think what I see the value in technical art is usually the profile is people that likes to get shit done, right? They want to see things happening, and they're really good at navigating between departments and divisions and being focused on cross-disciplinary functions. So they really understand what everyone is doing in the organization. And when you bring them on board, you can say, well, why don't you connect this cable with this cable and try to bring this together so you can get this faster? And then let's code something so it can actually be automated and save a lot of time. And when you're a studio with hundreds of people or even like 200, 100, like you still start to see more and more of this siloed approach because every team is in their own bubbles. Bringing technical art is a way also to build those bridges between those teams and help them collaborate with each other to make sure that the project is moving forward. So I think one of the best things that can happen, I would say, is even if you're like a AAA game or a triple, indie game, whatever, right? You can bring technical art team as well to talk with your creative director, your game director, like people that are responsible for how the game looks and feel, and say, okay, what is missing, in our game, or we want to do this, how you make it happen, and they will tell you, which things to connect together to make these things work. And of course, they will try to figure out what are the hacks and ways to push an engine to its limits, right? To find a basically way to really get the most out of it. How to tweak that rendering pipeline, how to tweak basically that animation pipeline to get things done faster. And so that is time you'll save, but also the quality of the
Mhm.
game will get better, right? It'll be improving. And so my recommendation for any people owning a studio out there is reach out to Marcus or other technical artists basically and talk with them and say, okay, what can you do to help us? This is our game. What can you see that could be done better, right? Because they will notice with their eyes, like, well, the animations look a bit sloppy here. Maybe it could be done on this. And say, well, we're not able to do that because of X. Or let's talk to the lead animator, like, why are we not doing this? And say, well, we have this problem. They will help you identify ways to get this done. Because talking about technical animation, right? So getting a game that looks and feel good, the more photorealistic the game is, the more realistic a game, it's very important. So, and as you know, with Unreal Engine, all those games coming out with Unreal Engine now, they all want to be photorealistic. But if the animation is janky and if there's a lot of issues, that needs to be addressed. And that's very specialized knowledge that most teams don't really have on hand. And this is where you need help most of the time. If you are working on the stylized game, even more actually, because you're fighting two different things. It's on the photorealistic side, animations, right? They need to feel real, and so you don't have this kind of uncanny valley of humans moving in a weird way. But for stylized aspect, you need to have animators doing some very specific and unique stuff that makes the the visual animations and the visual direction basically fit the theme, the style, and all this, and that requires to do
Yeah.
something that are usually unusual. So, and that you need to build it. Like, so if you're flying characters or like that are not, typical seen in birds or like humans don't fly, how do you merge those two worlds? You have to have a very good pipeline that able to do animations very easily, and so we don't have to do everything by hand and taking months, right? So
Yeah.
this is where,
On stylized games, animators want to do horrible things to models, right? Like they want to pull them
yeah,
apart 3 meters long and break elbows and all of those things. And yeah, those are very, very different challenges.
exactly. So, and I think this is really to help people are managing those projects. Why do they need this, right? And what also I noticed for me and being managing multiple teams is asking for help is not a skill that a lot of people in the industry have, right? Most people are just like, I can figure things out, and well, you can, but it's going to take you much longer. And I think that here we're talking here, how can you get it done faster so your game looks better and it's done cheaper? So here, this is what we're aiming at, right? Trying to find new solutions that can really make your life and your projects better. So yeah, I'm just going to, I've been rambling a bit, but
It's
I got
no, I mean, I 100% agree with everything you just said. It's funny that you brought up this, like, let's take this cable over here and this here and do this, because I remember doing that a lot as a kid.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think I think this is like a thing that tech artists like to do, right? Just there's a big red button that says don't press it. You're gonna press the big red button, just to find out what happens, and then you learn and you know next time because
like
um,
technical art is
yeah,
like hacking game development, right? It's like you're trying to find those shortcuts and break things down to see like, okay, how does this work and getting it better. um,
yeah, and I do this in my personal life too, over and over. Like one of the things that I really don't like, and probably many technical artists will say the same, is repetition. Doing something twice, 3 times. I want to, after a couple of times, I'm gonna find some way to automate this, um, so I can focus my time on something else. For
yeah,
me,
I
repetition is
think
one of those things where I don't gain anything from it.
what is very interesting is if you look in the history of game development, right? Historically, people had proprietary engines a lot more, right? So the programming team, the art team, they were used to work. They were smaller teams. They worked closer together, and they were constantly doing technical art stuff because they had to tweak the engines and like build new system to work on specific games. So everything was kind of custom made for that game and then thrown away. But now the games are getting bigger, they're more specialized, and we're asking more from those games. Sorry. Excuse me. And those features basically requires a lot more love, and they're more specialist skills. But that we kind of lost a bit that interconnection. So as teams got a bit bigger and yeah, this so this is where technical art is like to bridge those different teams together again as it used to, because there's so much need to know in every single skill set that now it's been challenging. You cannot know everything, and that's something where this is why technical art is becoming more and more prevalent, right? So I think that's the changes that we're seeing today. And this is in many different fields as well, in terms of why do we need producers now and before we used to not need that many, right? So it's really about bridging disciplines, communication, all this. And this team that communicates well, that's feeling that you're all in the same room working on the same thing, that's what every teams need to make a great game.
Yeah, and I think that field is widening too. I think that over the next 10 years or so, I think that a lot of like environment artists or animators or programmers, I think they're gonna move more towards the technical arts. And I think that the tech on the pie chart of all the disciplines, I think the technical art thing is just gonna keep growing.
To open a big can of worm right now and say, well, AI, basically now you're just prompting to say, hey, build this for me, right? Yes, so you're gonna start to do a bit more hands-on, and trying to bridge those different disciplines together. More people we're gonna be trying to get like, oh, I want this art with this animation, and how to make it together and blend it, right? So of course you need more technical art to make sure that this goes well and this communication goes well. So,
and honestly, this is a big topic, the whole AI thing, right? I'm split on it. I love it. I also don't love it. I think I love it if it's being used in the right way. And I think that over the course of like the last year or so, the amount of messages I've gotten from, just artists that I used to work with before, just not very technical people that said, hey, look, I made this Maya tool that does this. I'm like, this is amazing, like this is incredible because it allows anyone to do anything they want in a way. I think there's still a stopping point there right now, which is probably gonna it's probably gonna decrease. I think that stopping point, but the fact that people are able to do this is mind blowing and incredible to me. And at the same time, I think to me as a technical artist, I'm not afraid of AI replacing me. I don't think anyone should be. I think that what this allows me now is I can focus my time on other hard problems, right? So we've now given the tool to artists to do things that I've done for them before. It's great that they can do that now, right? So I can spend
that's
my
super
time
interesting
in
what you just
other
said.
meaningful things.
So you're saying you're not afraid that AI will replace your job, right? So, and that's great. Like let's a bit dive deep into that. One is because, well, maybe a lot of people say, hey, I want a job that is safe and they have a technical art. Maybe that's interesting. But generally speaking, is my first take on what you're saying is it's because we're solving problems, and even if AI solves some problems, we'll be focusing on solve other problems because game development is all about problems, solving problems. So, but how do you think AI will change the world of technical art, and why do you think technical art is going to be a discipline that will be fine or even thrive with the age of AI?
So I think that um, it's an incredible tool. I mean, it's there's many aspects to AI, right? If So for me personally, I'm very concerned about the way these models are trained right now. I think there's a lot of controversy. This is a huge concern that I have, and similarly with things like Midjourney and so on, right? Like the if the data is sourced in a good way, then I'm all for it. And so to me, I like to use it for things that I previously did not like, right? There's many aspects, even in the field of technical art. There's things that you just don't like doing. This is probably any job in the world, right? There's always some aspects you don't like. One of them for me is building UIs for tools, and the fact that I can now do this much faster is incredible, right? It saves me time to focus on solving the problems that I want to solve instead of, time on making a UI for a tool that I wrote, because that takes a long time to build a good UI for a tool. I mean, even just a simple tool with like two buttons and something that you select in there, if you want to build it right, like, that can take
Yeah.
significant
For,
amount of time.
for those who don't know out there, UI elements is one of the things that take the most time in terms of programming, right? So if you want things to be very precise and be at this point and doing this, takes way longer than making a new feature in games usually for the impact that is visible, right? So there's as a big things like this. So I've been personally surprised many times as a producer, XD producer, about like, oh, we need more programmers willing to do a UI and UX because they see this as tedious and it takes way longer time than people expect. So if your game is very UI and UX heavy, just keep this in mind. So, and AI might help you to get these things faster and lower that cost of production cost. Sorry, just this for the
Yeah.
anecdote for.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's it. And I think there's many aspects of it that it's going to increase more and more. I think rigging is one of those things, and I mean, rigging is just like building the puppet for being able to animate a character, right? Is still one of those aspects that's not taken over as much by AI, but I think it's probably going to increase quite a bit.
It's quite interesting because
And
I heard that actually would AI is pretty good actually making those rigs and animations and doing those connections. I shouldn't talk too much about this because it's your domain, not mine. But I think I heard it actually can generate those things much faster and easier than a human. But
so I think, yeah, so I think the answer is yes if you're making humans, because I think that's a very focused problem space, right? If you're working on like an Overwatch where there's like a hamster in a sci-fi sphere rolling around, that is probably difficult to automate something like this using AI. But yeah, we've seen it on humans, I think, and that's increasing for sure. We used to do mocap in these huge stages. They cost a lot of money. Now there's all these systems popping up where you do mocap with just 3 iPhones, right? The quality isn't quite there yet. Doesn't really compare with these huge systems, but I think the gap is closing.
yeah,
I don't know if we'll ever get there 100%, but it's getting there.
I think definitely the cost of making human animations through mocap and this have been decreasing tremendously in the past 5 years, right? It's been pretty incredible. You can get basically mocap sessions and all the services around pretty cheap. There's more and more studios popping up. Cannot tell how many people telling, I want to go to mocap studios. There's a lot of competition now, and this, but and AI will make that even easier because there's so much human animations out there and it's kind of easy to train models on animations for humans. It's super easy to do. Where it gets to be interesting and where actually technical art is very strong at is how to deal with special characters. So you want to make an animated raccoon that act like a human, very difficult to do because your model will be very different than a real life raccoon, and you cannot just copy human animations on a raccoon. It needs to be really custom made. And this is where
Yeah.
technical art can really help you to make that pipeline of making all those animations and adjusting it on the fly to make that game looks cool, right? So keep this in mind for your project. And this is what you're saying, Marcus, is AI is going to be struggling with that.
Yeah, I think so. Even if you collect all the data in the world, I think, yeah, I think that would still struggle. I mean, I thought about this for a long time. Like, can we ever train a model that's just trained on every single thing that was ever animated? And I I think it has its limits to the whole AI thing, right? Even if we train it on all the animation data that was ever created by humanity, you're just gonna get recycled data out of it, right? You don't get anything new out of it. Um, and so, I mean, this is especially true for stylized characters, right? I've worked with world class animators before, and they hate mocap because even just using that as a reference, right? Um, because what it does is it pre-paints brush strokes for them, right? They want to paint the
Hmm.
brush strokes. They don't want to just you know fill in the outlines that are already there. Um, so I think that that has its limits.
Yeah. So switching a bit topic now. We talked a bit about how to help studios and how to use technical art in this. Like, in your opinion, when you're looking out there, what what games do you think that are coming out recently? Do you think that most likely use a lot of technical art support? That game where you look at it and say, oh, this team really did a good job, and you can see that, and this has been pushed by how much they've pushed the technology, how things look like, and all this, and versus maybe some others that are being less, yeah, a bit less effective in that regard.
Yeah, it depends a bit on a bit. It's almost like you see it when it's not there. A lot of technical art is not very front end, like user facing, right? It's you're just building invisible things to the players,
Mhm.
and I think you often notice it when it's not there. Um,
So can you describe this maybe help people to train their eyes for that?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're playing a game with characters and they might just not move right, like between if they're walking from A to B and they're doing some sort of transition, it looks really stuttery, or they're jumping all over the place, and it's just like snappy movement and just not great deformation on characters. Deformation is a huge one that technical artists do. And then so going over to the shader side, I mean, there's some incredible technical artists making amazing shaders, and I think this is more of a like user facing thing. That's very obvious when it's there and when it's not there, right? I mean, God of War had incredible snow. You would notice if it didn't have good snow, but I almost feel like now that it has like really great snow, people just kind of take it for granted. When I played God of
Yeah,
War and I walked around in the snow, I saw it deform and fall off my feet. I was like, "Holy shit, this is
I
insane!"
think it was like Red Dead Redemption 2, right? That really implemented some of the new things with the snow, and that really made it a standard, right? With the steps with the horses in the snow and how the snow reacts. So this is really what technical art brings. You see, like this kind of natural, you know, deformation of the environment as well.
Yeah, and Redemption is a prime example, I think, of incredible technical artwork. Right, the horses just looked amazing. Right, you could see the muscle deform the skin. Yeah, all the bar was just so high for all these characters. Everything, all the jackets, all the cloth moved really really well. The hair moved really well on the characters. So there was a lot of like secondary animation going on, which I think is, at least on the technical animation side, that's a lot that we do. Is just cloth animation or simulation rather, and just physics simulations and things like this. And looking at all of their animations, I mean, the animation work on Red Dead Redemption was world class, right? It might not have been the most reactive game from a gameplay point of view, but that's not really what they were trying to go for, right? But if you just like analyzing it for like from a production quality point of view, Red Dead Redemption was incredible. All the animation transitions, the way you're falling off a horse when you're riding too fast and you're like, you know, trying to jump over like a log that's just in the road that you haven't seen,
Yeah,
and you didn't press the button in the right sequence or whatever. The way that the characters stumble when they're drunk, like all of these things,
I noticed
that's
even like
just
this
top technical art.
innovation is the bar is raising in multiple games. I was looking at Battlefield, one of the recent Battlefield, and how many transition animations they have, because the terrain is they're not working on a flat surface, right? They're just basically very detailed terrain. So how you're lying prone, how you're taking cover, all these things, right? And how the animation looks smoothly, right? So that the feet basically they're not flying anymore; they're just really always touching the
Mhm.
ground. Even and that's a lot of magic behind this thing to make it look, good.
This what you just pointed out is actually also one of those things that's very easy for people to spot. If your character is walking up like a slope and the feet are kind of hanging in the air, technical art can fix that for you. And slowly leaning your upper body forward as you're walking up a slope, and moving your upper body back a little bit as you're walking down a slope. All these like small little things that are very difficult to notice, but you notice it when they're not there.
So let's talk about something that I think is really difficult to do, because when I worked on Kingdom Come Deliverance, the first one, the layering of the clothing, right, was a really a nightmare, right? So because you were basically customizing different layers of armor and around, like, so what is the situation regarding this, and how things going in that field, right? It seems to be one of the areas still where a lot of challenges, right? Most games there's always clipping
Mhm.
somewhere, so
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably still the most challenging thing in just video game characters is when characters interact with each other, and if you have things like jackets and cloth that needs to interact with the player itself or with the environment, that is an incredibly hard challenge because for one, depending on what kind of game you're making, you know, players expect their character to move with whatever their buttons they're pressing, right? So I mean, as an example, in a shooter game, if I'm playing a first person character and I'm aiming my gun up straight at the sky, right? How does that look in third person? Have you ever seen a human doing that? That's not going to look great. And in a first person shooter game, you can within a single frame aim down or do a 360 spin, right? So you're doing all of these crazy things that need to that need to happen, right? And I mean, we need to do this so the other, if it's a multiplayer game, the other players see what you're doing, right? They need to know what you're aiming at, right? There's no way of like cheating this. And so you have this character with all these like a jacket on and like ponytail, long hair, or whatever. Um, we can do like a single layer of cloth very easily. Multiple layers is very very difficult because even the cloth that you're looking at in the game, it's like a fake version, right? What's actually happening underneath, because there's no volume to cloth in video games. It's a single plane, and everything that you're putting on top of that, it's just wrapped to that single layer. So any jacket you're having in a game, it might look like it has thickness, but there is no thickness to it. It's just a single plane. I mean, I think some physics solvers they have the concept of thickness, but having, for instance, like cloth collision, very very hard to do. So we cheat a lot. Sometimes for a specific character you might want cloth on cloth so it like looks like that you have that. Many games have like like a long skirt or something, and then maybe like a dangling sword on top of that. Those things are really really difficult to do. You most of the time just have to kind of cheat it, and build something underneath it that the player will never see. But yeah, it's those things are very hard to do still. There's some um, papers I've seen now where they try to do with machine learning concepts where instead of relying on actual physics, there's a model getting trained on how physics behaves, and it just kind of replays that, right? Those are all really really interesting things, but yeah, probably still not quite there yet, and part where hardware needs to get better, tools for that need to get better, but there's some interesting developments there for sure now.
yeah, yeah, that's the new frontier, I guess. Well, it's the old frontier, but it's still we're trying to push it further. Yeah, it's what I think means is it's technical art is in every places in your game, right? It's from how your character moves, how the environment is impacted, how the weather changes and reacts to this, right? So it is how you move from just having something very basic, to something that feels that brings an emotion to the player people when you're watching it, right? And sometimes they don't notice it, but it creates this atmosphere, this energy, this vibe into a game. There's a lot of hidden magic behind this, and well, people like Marcus and his company, Monster Puppet, this name of his company, they're helping studios to go and solve those challenges, right? And try to do it as cheap as possible because there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and if you want to do everything from scratch, well, that's very huge endeavor, meaning very expensive, which means it won't get it in the game most of the time. So my suggestion is, if you have any questions regarding technical art, feel free to reach out to Marcus at Monster Puppet, or you can contact me, or if you have any questions, you have to place them in the comments. We'll be happy to have a follow-up discussion with Marcus. I'll try to collect any feedback or questions people have, and we'll be happy to follow up and go in detail. If you have your project and you have a specific question, how will you tackle this? How will you address this? That'll be an interesting discussion to have really openly. So, and we can also invite you to talk about your project, to understand what challenges you're facing, what kind of help you need, and So yeah, just reach out. We'll be happy to talk with you. Marcus, any closing words?
No, but this was super fun. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus, for coming. And I'm going to talk to you in the next video then. Thank you. Ciao.
All right. See you.